Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Getting into our next subject here, talking about the NBA headlines from this past weekend. Before we get into the games themselves, we had some news other than the Trae Young injury about Steve Kerr, who got a contract extension, making him the highest paid head coach in the NBA in terms of annual value. He got a 2-year, $35 million extension that is good for $17.5 million per year, which surpasses Spoelstra. Greg Popovich does technically have a higher contract annually, but he is also the president of the Spurs, so holds more of a job description than just a head coach alone. As far as pure head coaches, Steve Kerr takes the reins in terms of the highest paid annually. My reactions to this is it makes a lot of sense. Now, Kerr has not been without scrutiny, while the Warriors have sort of staggered a little bit over these past couple years, but ultimately, I don't think that there is anything differently he really could have done. Now, the integration of the young pieces into the starting lineup and as real contributors hasn't been necessarily perfect. We've seen sort of the lack of development in these crucial draft slots where they've had a lot of good draft capital over the past couple years, and it hasn't necessarily panned out to be immediate success. This goes back to the James Wiseman draft in 2020, where he never fit in with the Warriors there. And I thought that it could have, because the big thing with Wiseman in that case, at the time at least, was the defensive awareness and sort of, I felt like, some of the more coachable aspects of the defensive side of the floor. And I thought that playing alongside Draymond Green was going to be able to, and Draymond specifically I reference because of how much of a vocal leader he is, how he's been the catalyst for their defense and has really held other players accountable, sometimes in a more beneficial way than others. But we saw Andrew Wiggins, of course, take the leap that he did specifically for their finals run in 2022, and I thought that we could see this organization help elevate James Wiseman to play some version of the brand of basketball that they were needing from him to be competitive. Ultimately, they end up winning a finals without him and trade him for a bunch of second round picks, for them to be exact, and in turn use those to get Gary Payton Jr. So he never panned out there. Of course, we've seen a couple of their other lottery picks. Kuminga has been a long time coming, but he is finally developing into the version of himself that made him be so highly touted coming out of high school, coming into the NBA draft, and being selected with the 6th pick. Moses Moody is someone that, again, lottery pick, wasn't necessarily seen to be superstar potential, but I thought that, and I still do think that there is some ceiling there that just hasn't been scratched. He's been dealing with a lot of inconsistencies in his playing time and in his shooting percentages as well. So, I think that is where, if you're going to give Kerr criticism, that's where it comes from. But, winning the 2022 finals the way that they did, especially after beating a Celtics team who maybe weren't the war-tested team. It's always interesting when you look at sort of the playoff failures, because it's this idea that in the NBA you need to suffer a playoff failure before becoming a championship team. Maybe that was for the Celtics, maybe that wasn't. They had made a bunch of Eastern Conference finals, but all in all, I think that Celtics team was better roster-wise than what the Warriors had, but the experience from the coaching, from the players themselves, they won that one, and the past couple years haven't been great for them, but they've still been hanging around there, and I don't think it's just quite as simple as Steph Curry alone, and now we've seen them be able to incorporate some more of the younger guys this season, at least, between Brandon Podziemski, Trayce Jackson-Davis, who has been great for them as of late, and I don't know. I guess Kerr, you can sort of pin it on him a little bit, the way that Draymond has been. I mean, Draymond's always going to be Draymond. It's pretty much impossible to hold that against him, but to let it spiral out of control the way that it did, I feel like after some of these, real canon events for the Warriors, with Draymond arguing with KD that really caused the rift and the departure of Kevin Durant for their team, or him punching Jordan Poole, it just doesn't feel like there's been necessarily tons of accountability from Kerr in these instances. But again, I'm not sure how much he possibly really could have done as it is anyways. But he gets this extension. It officially lines him up long-term to have his contract expire as Steph Curry's does through 2026. So it ties them together, at least through these next contracts. And I would imagine Kerr is going to, assuming that he wants to stick around long-term, as with Steph Curry, I don't see Curry playing for another organization. I know that people sort of like to throw out the ideas of it potentially, but I don't see that happening. I don't see Kerr going anywhere either. So it's going to have to be a little bit of a, we'll see how these next couple years all play out. The Warriors have been playing better as of late, but you look at a game like last night where they play the Nuggets, and I just don't think that they are on the same level as that Denver team, which is a real contender. And their offense has been very nice for a lot of these games, but I just don't think that they're in a position right now, especially with the volatility of Klay, that I won't get into all too much. We've been talking a lot of Klay Thompson on the show lately, and I just think that this core is past its level of contention. Now, does that mean that I think the Warriors as a whole are, you can write them off for the next handful of years? I don't think so, because I still think that Steph Curry is an incredible player. I think he can still be the best player on a championship team. I just think that you need to sort of figure out some of the others in this situation. If you can upgrade at a forward position, I know that they're not going to want to trade Kuminga at this point, and I don't know. I don't think that they will, especially because, frankly, I don't know what other options there really are out there. But they're going to need to make upgrades at certain positions as a whole. Whatever this next star that's available is, I think becomes a very interesting conversation when you talk about the Warriors, who, of course, did check in on LeBron James earlier, but around the trade deadline. It's on their minds that they potentially are looking for that next move, and they're not afraid to make a splash. So we'll see with all of that. There have been rumors that have come up over the past couple of years about trying to go and acquire Giannis. Now, Giannis probably is staying in Milwaukee. I know that he just re-signed on an extension last year, but we've sort of just seen the diminishment of free agency, really, with some of these stars in the NBA. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he could potentially get unhappy if things go the wrong way here in Milwaukee. And he talks so much about the idea of wanting to play for an organization that's all in, and that is Golden State sort of to a T, the way that they've been, for the past decade plus now. Just decade plus is a little stretching it a little bit, but I mean, they've been as committed to winning as anybody else in the league has, and it would be quite the sight there with Giannis in Golden State. But moving on here to sort of some of the other big storylines from the weekend. On the note of Giannis, the Bucks did pick up a couple big games versus some potential contenders. It started Friday night, where they played the Minnesota Timberwolves on the road and end up coming out on top in that one. I thought that what was specifically big for them was being able to come out in the second half of a close game and win that one. I think that their second halves, we've seen a lot of collapses from them and coming out flat. having other teams sort of adjust to what they're trying to do and beat them that way. But it was them dominating that third quarter where they win 36-13, and they were able to sort of power their way past the Timberwolves and stave them off for the rest of the game. You get big contributions for Malik Beasley in that third quarter there, and you end up pulling that one out by playing some pretty solid defense as well, which is something that has, of course, been a massive conversation around the Bucks for the entirety of this season, really. And I think that was probably just about their best win this season as a whole. They also stomped out the 76ers yesterday afternoon, which I included them in the potential contenders phrasing there. I still am not bought in on the 76ers. I feel like I should maybe take them out of it, because at this point I would be surprised if the Sixers were to win the finals, and obviously if they were to, this would be with Joel Embiid. They wouldn't be able to do so without. But again, another really good job defensively in that one, held Philadelphia to just 98 points. So I thought that was a very nice way for them to come out in the second half of the season here, coming out of All-Star break and being able to sort of establish yourselves, as I know that things looked really bad there at the end of the first half of the season with that loss to Memphis, but we are to be taken seriously, and I think that's what they showed through these first couple games. They have one of the most difficult schedules going forward for the rest of the season, so they're going to be battle tested, but I think that is honestly a plus for them, because you might drop some extra games, but as we keep saying on this show, I think that it's so much more than just wins and losses for the Bucks. Otherwise, they wouldn't have fired Adrian Griffin. It was about changing the identity, making yourself look like more of a legitimate championship team, and they're going to have plenty of opportunities against some of these other top teams in their conference and some in the Western Conference to sort of get those real reps against the top competitors and grow from there. So Bucks, not saying they're officially back, but they are in the direction of sort of ideally getting to play some of their best basketball down the stretch of the season. And if that happens, I think that anything can go down in that Eastern Conference. That is pretty open. The other main takeaway I had from this weekend that I'm just going to quickly cover, because I feel like I talk about him a lot here on this show, but that is Victor Wembenyama, who put together 2 straight 5-block, 5-steal games, and we're still, not necessarily seeing the closing, perfect offense from him down the stretch, but I wanted to just at least mention the idea of him winning Defensive Player of the Year. Now, I know that it is out of reach. Rudy Gobert has been the leader in this category for the majority of the season in terms of odd-wise, and he plays on one of the best defenses in the league. He is the best defender on that team who really controls it all. He's probably going to run away with it, but Wemby's going to make an all-defensive team. I would imagine this upcoming season. I don't remember off the top of my head. I know that the All-NBA teams are going to positionless. I'm not sure if that is included in, all defensive teams, because he's a top 2 defender in the league this year. So will he be first team? If it's still positionally based, he'll probably be second team, also listed as a center. But he just continues to impress me so much, and we talked about the face of the league next year. Or last week we talked about sort of the next face of the league conversation, and I do think that he has real potential in that as well, because of just the freakish size and dimensions of him, put along with the fact that he seems like a very, a very smart, well put together young piece that could be a potential role model. And I just think that this is the worst we're going to see him at offensively, at least the least polished, and he's going to continue to get better. And I think that he is a very impressive young prospect. So that is all we have time for right now in terms of the NBA, but sure, we will be getting into plenty more as the week comes on. We're going to be taking our final break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be talking some college basketball after a lot of controversy going down this weekend in the NCAA. So stick with us. We will be getting into all of that right after this break.